Hi everyone, I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're going to dig into something that's surely on everyone's mind right now. How AI is fundamentally changing marketing technology, and more importantly, how organizations, especially enterprise organizations, need to rethink their entire Martech stack in 2026. Very excited, joined today by Ken Madsen, who is the Chief Marketing Technologist at Ascendis and is known in the industry as the Martech Whisperer. Ken, welcome. Can you give us a brief overview of yourself, your career? Introduce yourself, please.
Great. Well, first of all, Kees, thank you for having me, and look forward to sharing some of my world and what's going on here on the other side of the pond and globally, if you will. So, a little background. I started a production agency here in New York City. Oh gosh, now I'm going to date myself. 20 something years ago. When I say production agency, we were, and there's a term that was used years ago as well called decouplers. So my production agency, we took marketing execution, marketing tactics away from the advertising agencies, decoupling that, doing it better, faster, cheaper through our studios, using people, tech, and process. Grew that company. I think globally we had 15 cities around the world, and we were working with brands direct and helping them optimize their dollars in the marketing supply chain. So through that, and this will lead into what we're going to talk about today, one of the key things that helped us with growth and build relationships with the brands, the Fortune 2000 of today, was a consultative or solution front. We had a team that would go in to a lot of these brands and look at their current state, look for what we call gaps in people, process, tech, how they're collaborating with third-party partners through technology or process and such, and really start to show how they can optimize that and build a better future state or future-ready state. We started to get pretty savvy around marketing technology, even using it ourselves, but then also helping brands build in-house creative ops and or creative in-house, if that makes sense. So I sold that organization to a French company based out of Paris, probably about 10 years ago. And part of my next chapter, and this is the part I love, and this is where I am today, is helping brands curate, go in, look at that current state, look at those gaps, do a gap analysis, and then what is that phased approach to mature what they're doing and creating content and pushing it out. So I've been doing that for years, and it's something I enjoy. It's the puzzle I'm helping brands put together. And I could go on for hours about my background, but let's think forward. But anyway, that's kind of the brief on my world.
All right. Thank you for the intro. So Ken, before we get into it, I want to start with something you recently said that really caught my attention. You mentioned that when it comes to AI, many organizations keep automating old processes instead of unlocking new possibilities. Why should this behavior change, and what's at risk if it doesn't change?
Great question. That's the billion-dollar question. Look, if you're automating, and this is what's happening, if you're automating yesterday's inefficiencies, you're not transforming, you're fossilizing, right? So, and everybody says, hey, with AI, for example, we need to move faster through AI. I think it really needs to be a combination of faster and smarter, right? So it's not about the inefficiencies. It's the readiness for the organization, and unfortunately, 90% of the organizations that we're talking to today, their foundational platforms, their foundational business processes and such are actually not ready for AI. So it's about how do we get them ready? And we call it the readiness play. So that once we have that foundation and that re-architecture of process and the organizational models that are changed and ready and set up for AI, for example, then we can start to apply the AI or agentic plays, if you will.
So Ken, beyond the impressive career and your Martech Whisperer title, tell us something about you as a person. What drives you? What do you do when you're not thinking about Martech?
Well, I'm always thinking about Martech because I love doing it, and it's systems thinking. But I love that question. And I just thought of, I just bought a place out east. If you're in New York and you say out east, it's the Hamptons area. I started an oyster farm. No, this is crazy. It's really off in a tangent. But I was thinking about this and I love it. I love, family and spending time with family and friends, very important to me. But the other thing is having a hobby. And then I thought about my hobby, which is, cultivating oysters, farming oysters. And what does it take to get good output, which is a good oyster that's fresh and tastes great, right? So when we talk about Martech, in helping organizations, there are three things we look at: is the process, people, and technology. With oyster cultivation, there's the tidal, or what we call the tidal, or the flow of the water, is very important for them to survive and be healthy. And then you could equate that, I guess, tidal, the flow, to process, right? And then the oysters need that food, right? Or for example, the algae level and algae types need to be efficient and rich for them to have that growth too. And I don't know if the algae might be the tech play. And then, of course, the water makeup, right? So when we call it brackish water, which is a mix of salt level with fresh water. And if those levels are right, that body of water's right, you flourish and your growth rate is better and your output is good. And maybe the water would be the people, that surround the organization. So it's still about system building, right? Or system thinking. And so it's kind of, there's a little bit of a parallel.
Okay, Ken, so everyone's putting out 2026 predictions these days. So instead of adding more predictions, I found two that seem particularly relevant to your focus and practice. So what I want to try is get your take on these with some real world examples if you have them. The first prediction is about agentic AI reshaping enterprise workflows and Martech. The thinking here is that by 2026, a large share of enterprises will integrate AI-driven autonomous agents into their operations, especially in marketing and creative workflows. These agentic systems will plan, act, learn independently, fundamentally changing how teams structure work and measure value, not just automating old steps, but reimagining what's possible. What do you think?
Yeah, okay. So there's this debate with, depending who you're talking to, right? So if you're financial and economic driven, folks, audiences within organizations are looking at, can we pull the lever on labor, right? Or FTE levels. I don't look at that. I look at agentic AI isn't about replacing humans. It's about rewiring how teams create, decide, and deliver content in the marketing supply chain. Where in those work streams and or workflows are there moments where we can apply an AI or an agentic activity? And this is where I talk about, with other marketing technologists out there, is the TVA. What's the tangible value application? And what's driving, either helping the agents as planners or Q&A reviewers or workflow orchestrators, where are we actually applying it, where we're getting the value from it. So I equate that to what we call TVA. And we're actually developing a scoring around that. So can we get a TVA score around what we just did? Look at the benchmark, the current state, and then as we apply this tech, AI and or, and this is assuming the readiness phase is done, right? That we've actually got the organization ready to actually apply, the foundational things are in play. So an example might be, mapping email chains into modular workflows with agents handling the approvals and things of that nature. And we'll talk later about, maybe the top 3 or top 4s that we're actually seeing the TVA and real world things going on in activities.
And just to help us understand this concept, can you give examples of the type of KPIs that you would be looking at in a scorecard? Is it about time or quality, or what's the measure of value?
Yeah, so I think it's time, it's accuracy, it's compliance, it's giving the ability to organizations to be focusing on higher value activities and let those lower value activities be automated through either automation, machine learning. It could be algorithmic logic plays, because sometimes that actually has a value, things of that nature. In 2026, trust will be in the new KPI around that. And the better we can get at measuring it, and this will go back to some things we're going to talk about McKinsey, is what they're seeing in a report they put out, I think, 6 months ago. And by the way, 6 months is a long time for tech, right? So Moore's law is done. So we'll see where that goes. But to answer it's the governance as a growth enabler, not a constraint. And I think that the governance piece, because we're seeing the automation and trusting more of these agentic and or AI plays, this will be an interesting play. And it shouldn't be a constraint. It should be an expediter, right?
Yeah. All right. The next one that I found is about governance and human AI collaboration. The idea here is that in 2026, the leading edge won't be who has more AI features, but who excels in governance, transparency, and real collaboration between humans and AI. Enterprises will shift major budgets towards areas like risk management, explainability, training, and human-in-the-loop design, making trust and accountability the new baseline for competitive advantage. You already hinted at trust.
Yeah.
Linking it to competitive advantage, what does that mean?
So humans in the loop as checkpoints and as accelerators, build the trust, the compliance. Let's be real. If an organization is on a journey to, again, get the foundational readiness done, right? And now they start to find those moments to apply an agentic or agent play. At the end of the day, it's a growth enabler, right? You're bringing harmony to the organization, which is a psychological, the change management play as well, which is people start to embrace it. But at the end of the day, if you're getting, for example, better content to channels and they're more dialed in and they're more consumer centric, you're going to get lift. And that becomes the organization's competitive advantage.
Right, and the trust is a condition for that to accelerate. What's the role of trust in that whole story?
There's a couple things, right? So in the journey in the last 3 years, we've seen, for example, agentic or AI generative plays, right, where it's creating a visual, and we went from 6 fingers on a hand to now 5 fingers. And now there's the detail in that is getting more trusted, and it's more aligned to the brand position, the brand story, and things of that nature. So we've seen, and again, forget Moore's law. There's just a new AI law here. Is every month we're seeing updates within LLMs and AI platforms and tools and apps. So it's only going to get better, and it's only going to be trusted more. With that said, I still want a human eye in the process and human touches to the deliverables. So I'm hoping that gives you a feel for what we're seeing.
Absolutely. Okay, Ken, so the introduction of the role of the Chief Marketing Technologist, the CMT, as the person who can truly reimagine Martech as an intelligent growth engine, is that going to address the impact of AI agents and governance that we just discussed? Can you talk to us about CMT and the scope of that new role that you envision?
Sure. It's funny. CMT, Chief Marketing Technologist, and a lot of times when I introduce myself to a brand, I am the Chief Marketing Technologist. I actually do a pause and say, I want to explain what that role means. And basically, and this is something Scott Brinker, who's a friend of mine, MIT, part of HubSpot, is a marketing technologist as well. There was a deck, I think, I'm going to date myself again, 15 years ago, that talked about, as we see the growth of marketing technology and ad tech, and now Martech and ad tech are kind of mixed together. Organizations trying to navigate that, understand, we've got over 14,000 different marketing technologies in play right now. 15 years ago, it was 200, and we thought that was a lot. So how does an organization, a brand, navigate that world and find best of breed and find and curate the right ecosystems to build that content factory, if you will, right? Again, with the lens around optimizing the marketing supply chain. So the role, the demand for somebody that sits in the intersection between brand, creative, CMOs, CDMOs, and then the IT, the CTOs of the world, and be able to bridge those challenges and or opportunities to say, help curate. Ken, how do we curate and peripherally look at where we can start to build an ecosystem, Martech ecosystem that can help us deliver better content, consumer-centric, and the list goes on. So one of the things that we do is, as me as a chief marketing technologist, is help brands navigate that, but also identify in the organization a candidate that can become the CMT of the brand. I really think brands need that type of skill set and type of person to be on board, right? Because the CMT, like you were alluding to earlier, is the architect of intelligent growth, bridging creativity, technology, and governance.
Yeah. And in the accounts that you work with, the clients you work with, how many of these CMTs do you see? Is it early? Is it in the middle? How mature is this?
Great question, Kees. Unfortunately, I would say probably 95% of the folks that we're talking don't have that innovation, Martech leadership role. And look, it's a conundrum, right? I mean, we're hired to help navigate that, but I really would love to see the Fortune 2000 and even startups start to identify that role and skill set. Yes, it'll cannibalize our work and what we do, but you know what? It's an easier conversation and we can fast track those builds, right? If we had somebody that had that skill set.
Yeah. Yeah, because the work continues when you're not around. And I guess the flip side of it, if you don't have that role, there's a lot of siloed work, siloed thinking, which in the age of AI is even more difficult, because if you ever want to do agentic, then silos are kind of where it all breaks down, right?
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier. I mean, if you're only amplifying chaos if you don't get that foundation back. But the other piece here too is when we're talking to brands and we're doing our job in helping building that future state and a maturity model, one of the outputs, and we're starting to have more of these conversations, is XYZ brand, start to think about who in your organization could act as the CMT, because that's going to help you sustain. Yes, we want to journey with you, but the journey will be even more in concert and collaborative if we can have that discussion with somebody that is inside, really owns it, and sustains that ecosystem and matures it over time too.
And maybe also have a mandate to take certain decisions that cut across departmental or team remits and bring things together a bit more.
When you're built, exactly. So again, we can go really deep on this, but when we look at the lens of the marketing supply chain, a lot of folks will say, Ken, why are we even talking to our team that's working on our ERP or Oracle or SAP or Infos? Because if we're doing our job right, for example, specific to a dam, a lot of the data, the product ID, the material IDs, the product lifecycle management systems have meta tagging data that should journey with the assets as they're created and tie it back. Where was it born? And how do we find parent-child relationships with that? And then when you get into creative automation now, which is, and we'll talk about this later, as you create adaptations and derivatives, how are we managing and tying that back cost-wise to the master or where it was born, right?
So Ken, this brings me to something closer to home for us at Chili Publish. What are the 3 top AI plays you're seeing where brands are starting to optimize the marketing supply chain activities?
Well, let's. Okay, maybe there's four. I'll just say three. And look, you're going to talk to me next week, and in 2 weeks from now, and we're going to see something else surface, right? So let's start from the beginning. As we look at an ecosystem, one really key play right now that's powerful is smart briefing. And what I mean by smart briefing is where we bring in an AI play where we're prompting, building the brief, the creative brief. It could be a media brief, and it is going out. It's doing the work to bring in the data, the research, reference images. It may create, some of these are pretty sophisticated, where it might create ideations or inspirational images to say this is where we're going in the brief. And when they hand off to the agency of record or in-house agency, they're really well informed from specifications to ratios, what that kit needs to look like. So that to me is very powerful. And we've done some POCs and pilots with certain cosmetic brands and have seen that smart brief, just knowing the psychological part for a brand owner to know that they can generate that brief pretty quickly and it's rich with information and the handoff is better and you're not going back and forth. So that's one thing. Now, the other, if you're looking at the workflow and the market or the work stream, is we start to identify, and this is more in your world, what Chili Publish is the creative automation. And what does that mean? So where we can find moments where you're taking a master, let's just use a 30-second ad, or maybe it's a dynamic digital ad, you then need to make not 100, maybe sometimes 1,000 adaptations of that actual master. And typically we would go into our third-party partners and they'd have a studio and produce that. Well, huge paradigm shift there. I mean, if I were to look at, and I only started with smart briefing because it's the beginning, right? And I'm trying to walk you through a process here. That to me, the impact of that is substantial. Just think about it. So you got a media buy and you got 110 different digital ad types, formats, color spaces. A platform like Chili Publish can create that in seconds. And not only do those outputs, but get it ready for the channel. Also be compliant, follow the brand guideline play. And if we're even doing our job even more, we're enriching that tool set with compliance and or regional rules, right? So if, for example, the ad is produced and we know it's going to go into France and it's got food in the background, it'll red flag that and say you're going to get fined, right? Something of that nature. So that's where we start going into, and this is the last piece, is if we can build out what we call the brand portal part of that. Brand portal being small language model, if you will, with a RAG on top. You feed it your brand guidelines, and you guys are touching this as well. You feed it regulatory governing bodies, whether it be by country, region, United States, by state, because if we have, for example, gaming industry, by state it changes. It knows when that is going into the channel in a specific region or a local area, it can red flag that. So it can help clearing teams. And that's a lot of manpower. It actually reduce risk. So there's risk mitigation there. And then the fourth thing, because I want to add this, is, and this is it's almost a staple with most dams, is the ability to take your human-born taxonomy, meta tagging schema for the assets that might be in that dam, but also run that through by pixel an AI meta tagging layer, so that it can actually by pixel identify other call outs, so that when the audience is searching through the dam, it can say, for example, looking for a red car that is in a parking lot in front of whatever store. That might not be part of your taxonomy, your meta tagging schema. It knows it because it did the pixel review, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I'll stop there. There's other things that are starting to surface, but I think those are the three top and or four plays today.
Can you zoom out a bit and look at those 3-4 plays and talk about what the main output or impact of AI in this stage is when these are the top plays?
Yeah. So first of all, assuming we've done benchmarking, right? How is the current state? So you can only imagine, for example, on the smart briefing, where we've seen, and I'm not going to name names here, but certain cosmetic and or CPGs, they wait to the last minute to get that brief in to the partner.
Yeah.
And if they know, and the psychological part is they know they can actually do that pretty quickly, they get it done earlier, and we sped up the process there, right? So we get the timeline, right? But the other output of that is more accurate, right? So now we're going through that process, so you can see you're pulling levers on time and accuracy, compliance, risk mitigation. When you get into the creative automation output, it's I said paradigm shift. It is, because that becomes the competitive advantage for the organization to be able to tap. We call this the marketing execution gap, right? The demand for more content, and because we get, I don't know, every 2 weeks there's a new social channel that's born where a brand can take advantage of promoting. It's hard to even chase all those channels and opportunities, let alone.
Right. Yeah.
Organizations still have the same people and resources. So how do we actually kill that gap? Creative automation, right? You're not putting any more resources. You get leveraging the technology to get you more output.
Yeah. And the last piece about the pixel control and the tagging and the metadata and having more information through AI than you would have before.
So if you think about it, look, assuming an organization has good damn governance, taxonomy's sound, it's the common language, that's great. But you always will have new audiences and or ways people get into the dam to start to search for assets. And that just builds and makes those assets richer with content, so that I can, like I use that example, the red car in front of a store, or maybe a different scene that's not inherent in the human tagging level, right? Yeah. So the ability to make sure you're finding given assets already built that can be repurposed, as opposed to going out and if you can't find it, usually someone goes out and they shoot another ad or they do another production play, and the cost and timing comes into play, right? So that's where we're seeing the, if you want to call it the damn AI level or AI level.
All right, Ken. Now let's get to the heart of the conversation. You've said that rewiring Martech isn't just a tech challenge, it's an organizational one. You've referenced McKinsey's latest piece that calls out the fault lines holding Martech back: lack of executive sponsorship, stack complexity, unclear ROI, and a talent gap. I'd love for you to give us a stark recent example of each of these fault lines from your daily interactions with clients. And maybe for each one, what's your take and advice? Let's start with executive sponsorship. What's the fault line when it comes to leadership around AI?
So, and even with, let's put AI aside and Martech and marketing technology, we need the organization to declare that they're going to either go through transformation to be more, what do you want to call it, innovative. It has to start at the top. So from the C level, there needs to be an edict and a declaration driven, communicated to the organization that, look, we are here right now. We're going to put in a program or a project or an initiative that's going to take us from point A to point B. And the deliverables or the execution pieces in between that stages, wherever they are organized, agile or not, is what does that path look like and what's the objective? And is the objective reasonable, right? So long way to say, you need the organization at the high level. You need the edict and declaration that they're doing whatever that project is.
All right. And
number one.
If you don't have that like top-down edict, what does that mean?
So it's funny because a lot of times when we go into projects and we have opportunities to work with brands, one of the first things we ask is, where did this initiative, this project, where was it born? Was it at the middle management level? And do we have support of the C level? And we tease that to say, look, the formula for success for us is that we have that edict and make sure that was communicated. Almost teasing OCM or organizational change management, and this, we call it the psychology of the organization. So that helps us. If you're looking for the formula for success, I would say that's 25% of that formula is actually that activity has gone on.
All right. Let's have a look at number 2, stack complexity. So when is stack complexity becoming a problem that's kind of keeping this transformation from moving forward?
So, if you talk to me 5 years ago and said if an organization has a ton of tech, Martech, ad tech, and it's all over the place, I'd say, first of all, we need to go in and understand where there are redundant, or we call it tech creep. So, for example, one cosmetic company, we went in to look at what project management tools did they have within their divisions and in their brand departments, and we found globally they had 4 different project management tools. They had hundreds of licenses of each of those, and their monthlies, because it was easy for the corporate card for a brand owner to go and activate a project management tool, we had tech creep there, right? So part of our job is to identify that current state and then say, look, we need a consolidation. And that makes sense, right? So we have one license, we have economies of scale, and a standard way of working. But there are other things that are going on. The complexity piece is that you've got lots of different layers and types of tech, and they're not connected. They're not informing each other. So we need to take that siloed play, and you hear this all the time, and not to sound too consultant-like, how do we bridge those and make it a more connected, more harmonious ecosystem? And I would say that's part of the setup for success, is to actually harmonize that. In fact, one brand we work with, they actually called the project Harmony. So tech stack complexity is sometimes there's so many different types of technologies and layers that we need to start to think about how to wrangle that and can make it more connected. Now, with that said, today you could have that complexity, and if each one of those tech points or point solutions, as long as they're connected, and AI can help and agents can help make that more connected and make it more embedded. So complexity today, I won't poo-poo, if an organization has all this different types of tech, because I think we can be creative, and with the help of AI and the data governance play, and how AI, like humans, is oxygen is important for us to live, for AI to live, or agentic is the data. It needs to be living and flowing. Getting back to our oyster conversation. So that I think that answers the stack complexity. Yes, if we could find, for example, dams today have more modular based approaches. They have a workflow tool tied into it, so they've expanded their footprint. On the creative automation side, with a Chili, you've got your different module offerings. So a lot of that's compacted, which makes things easier for us to tie them all together.
So it's not complexity per se, but the wrong or the good type of complexity. As long as it's open and can be approached, then you can make it work.
And that talks to is the platform mock, right? Microservices friendly, API first, cloud based, of course, and then headless, where we can actually tie that all together. Open architecture, really, right?
Yeah. All right. Next one, unclear ROI. One of the fault lines of AI adoption, when we have unclear ROI. Is it about ROI, or is it about how we define what ROI is?
So two things, or a couple things here. ROI must tie into growth metrics, right? We all say, and then not the vanity KPIs. Like there's some weird KPIs, especially with marketing automation, and how many hits something had. But at the end of the day, was there a sale? Did we get lift, right? So how do we tie that in? After you're doing proper benchmarking, and then you're introducing new creative and more creative to, here's the creative automation where you're actually getting into those channels. Talk about foundational things. A lot of times brands do not have the feedback loops wrangled, so they can actually see what that performance was. And then if they're doing it right and we're wrangling the data back about the performance of the asset that went out, finding the ones that are working, whether it's a red, green, and blue, red, green, yellow symbol on the asset saying, hey, this one actually has really good performance. Team globally should be starting to try to use that and get derivatives or adaptations of that particular marketing piece. I'm going a little deep, but the point of that is if we can get that life cycle, that feedback loop about performance, we then start to think about return on use. So this is a new term being played as another term that we're seeing is content at scale. I hear it with a lot of brands. We need to do content at scale. And of course, that begs creative automation, right? And make sure that foundation is there. But the idea of return on use is as it goes out and it comes back in, how do we make it more dialed in? We see the performance real time, and that's the holy grail. And then we can start doing what we call predictive and use predictive platforms to actually, in the ideation, before you do the testing, is already predicting what's going to, again, go. This could be a whole other conversation, Keelan.
Yeah. All right. Last one, the talent gap. We've heard about it a lot. AI is here. If we want to reap the benefits of it, our people need to understand how to apply it. What's your take?
So, okay, we talked about the CMT role, right? We know that, but let's bring the lens back a little bit and open it up the aperture here. The gap in talent is organizationally, they're not ready. And I love when we go into an organization, they say, hey, we have an AI team or a center of excellence around AI. And you look at the team, 15 to 20 members, and yes, they're cross-functional, but there's no real deep knowledge of, large language model, vector, RAGs. How do we actually utilize this, put this in process? We always look at a lens of, there's AI for me in the organization that I'm helping write my emails and write my paper, feedback. There's AI for the team, where the team is collaborating and using, and we're seeing heavy weight of those two. The third one is AI for corporate, and that's where it's weak. Is where are we introducing an agentic layer, for example, and really streamlining and doing the work, and again, not about replacing people, but arming them with tools to do the lower value executions and focus on more, like, for example, in the marketing supply chain, the creative strategy, right? So that talent gap is, you should be aware of all the LLMs. I'm going to sound like a lot of people talking here, but about AI is you need to be curious and as an organization and be bold to start to practice it. This goes to that McKinsey play where they reported, look, it's not really hitting the P&Ls of most of the Fortune 500, right? Well, remember, that was reported 6 months ago. And a lot of people were doing pilots and they were doing proof of concepts around AI, learning, and they were curious, which is a great movement. And I looked at that report and a lot of people took it as they inferred negativity. I look at it as positive. You've got to test and show and trust, right? I now see that activating. Now the boldness comes in. Curiosity was there through the POCs and the pilots. This is where we really turn things on.
Right. But the talent gap you see at the corporate level.
Yeah, I see the talent more. It's not specific to a person, although the CMT role is a great, that's the, intersection of all that. It's really the talent of the organization, the maturity to understand and embrace that.
Yeah, very clear. Okay, Ken, let's wrap it up. Thanks for a really great conversation. Maybe to close off, can you kind of give us a snapshot of, in your practice, where you see organizations are at the end of 2025 and what we will start seeing and where we will need to start focusing going into 2026 when it comes to enterprise-wide adoption of AI?
So I'm going to answer that again with the lens around the marketing supply chain. How do we optimize that, right? And where are we going to apply, for example, an AI play or agentic? Um, I think there's an inflection point for sure. I think where most companies are beyond that POC or pilot play. Now, with that said, there's a large number of organizations, companies that haven't even done that, right? And they might be getting their teams to use, for example, Chat GPT and or Copilot, their Microsoft backend, just to start to tease that. But when we look at the marketing supply chain side, I mentioned the 3 or 4 areas where we can apply to get TVA. 2026 is the year that finally we're going to affect the P&L. We're going to start to see the levers pulled, whether it be efficiency, compliance, risk mitigation, things of that nature. And if we're measuring that correctly, it'll tie back into the P&L and the EBITDA. So that's the good news. But I still think, look, if you're a brand and you're not playing in this space right now, or at least being curious and bold enough to actually start to activate and find the right partners to help you get there, you're going to lose that competitive advantage. And the ones that are doing it, the ones that are there right now, and they've got a structure and the right organization to re-architect the process, and the org models are changed for this, they're going to win.
All right. I think that's a very good conclusion. Ken, this has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for joining me today. I think what really comes through is that we're at this inflection point, like you mentioned, where technology is ready, but the organizational models haven't caught up yet. You're here to help. So Ken Madsen of Ascendis, people can reach out to you and put their problems on your table and see how you can help them. The companies that figure out how to bridge the gaps that we discussed, whether through a CMT role or some other structure, are going to have a massive advantage. Thanks so much for your time and for sharing these perspectives with us, Ken.
Thanks for having me, Kees. Cheers.